Welcome to another episode of Don't Call It Small. I'm your host, Natasha Foreman. If you don't know me and you have no clue what this podcast is all about, let me share a bit. I'm the CEO of Foreman & Associates, LLC, where we provide consulting, business support, and professional development services. And Don't Call It Small is where we talk all things business, share tips and news that you can use, and highlight the people and ideas behind the products and services that we buy. To learn more about our team, please visit foremanllc.com. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? It's a blessing to be back for another episode. I'm really pumped up about today's episode because it's something that is near and dear to my heart. Something that I always think about. And that happens to be, we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of interviewing. And it's important to me because as a professor, as a consultant, I see a lot of things that irk me on both sides. I also used to be a corporate recruiter. I have HR, experience. I teach HR management. So I'm constantly working with my students to be stronger interviewees, but also teaching them how to be strong interviewers. And there's a quote that I wanted to share. I don't know who to credit the quote to. I just saw it online. There was no person noted, but the quote says, "A job interview is not a test of your knowledge, but your ability to use it at the right time." And I always share with people, my students and anyone else, and I've said it plenty of times, even on this podcast, that the relationship that we have with a company is no different than our relationships that we have with individuals. It's no different than dating, right? And if you recall, I've said in previous episodes that the online profile that you put up on whatever job site and whatever job posting that company puts up is just like a dating profile. And you reach out to the job through that posting, you apply. And if they're interested, they say, hey, well, let's consider, meeting up for coffee or tea or whatever the case may be. It could be that you choose to, let's talk on the phone. And that's no different than what we do when we're meeting for a romantic connection, or however you want to look at it. And that, of course, translates and transfers to repeated engagements, right? Repeated dating, right? We keep going out on these dates. Those are just those interviews. And then at some point, the company says, hey, I'm really interested in, making this more of a, long-term thing. I want to, just date you and see where this will go. And then you decide if that works for you or not. And you make that agreement, and from there, you are now, in this kind of exclusive dating relationship. And at some point, one or both of you will say it's, that you want to take things up to the next level. You want, more. You want to see more, do more, be part of something more. Or you say, this just isn't working for me. Well, that's exactly what we do in business, right? It's the same thing. We go through all of these different functions and processes and formalities. And what we sometimes forget is that this is a relationship. And I think that the issue that I have with a lot of companies is that you did a lot to entice someone to want to date you. But then what are you doing to make them want to remain in a relationship with you, to be committed to you? And I think that a lot of companies think that the paycheck or just, being part of something is good enough. that's not what you were advertising, right? That's not what your dating profile advertised, company XYZ. So you sold, these goods of that you're going to provide these different things. It was going to be this type of environment. They were going to feel this kind of way with you. And then you got them, and then you just started doing your own thing. That's no different than, on the flip side, the person who interviewed for the position, who said they were capable of doing this and that. They said they would bring this to the table, and then they dropped the ball. Maybe they lied, right, on their profile. We have to remember the whole basically enchilada, the whole meal of what this is, looking at all of these different variables and understanding this all about relationships. And it's not necessarily how we come into that relationship, it's what we do in it. And then if that relationship comes to an end, how we go about ending it, right? And so I think that this episode, speaking to anyone who is pursuing a position or anyone that is considering hiring for positions, is really understanding your role in that relationship and what are you about to commit yourself to. And if you're not willing to commit to what you say, don't do it, right? And I think that there's some of the things. So I wanted to, thinking about my HR management students over the years, oh goodness, I had them take part in some of my own little surveys and polls, and I'd interview them, and I'd have them interview each other. I'd have them take part in group interviews where there was one interviewer interviewing several, and then I would have them be interviewed by multiple interviewers so they could kind of get a feel. And then from there, I also gave them feedback and critiqued them on these different elements that I would expect to see from both the interviewer and the interviewee. One thing that I noticed that a lot of my students never took the time, although I had given them the information about the company in advance, they didn't take the time to really research the company and find out about their culture as much as they could. They didn't ask for the job at any point in the interview. They didn't follow up afterwards. They didn't, initiate a thank you for the interview and before and at the conclusion of the interview. I found that some of the mistakes they made was that they didn't bring anything to take notes with. So, unless you have just an amazing memory and you can just, you have a photographic memory or whatever, right? You just can hold it all in there as a human sponge. You really should come in with, a pad and pen or pencil to take notes. It's one thing that you're able to then make sure that you're keeping track of everything that's being said. So after the interview, you don't have questions because you took notes. Number two, it lets the interviewer know that you're very in tune with this and understanding that this relationship is about you guys finding things out. So you're taking it seriously. And both of you are very aware that you're also recording anything that is being, promised in this interview. So I noticed that some of my students didn't do that. They didn't provide a list of references, and they didn't come with multiple resumes, right? So they may have just showed up with just one resume. That right there is not a good thing, because what if on your way to the interview one of your resumes fell, or you come in and you find out there's 4 people interviewing you but you only provided one resume? Are you expecting them to pass it down the line? So there's all these different things that should come in play. You should also have more than one resume, because even if it is only one interviewer, I know that when I was a recruiter, just as I do now when I am interviewing people, is I will write on their resume, but I need to also have a clean copy to hand off to someone else, right? Because people don't need to be reading my notes. So you should always have multiple copies. So I noticed that those are some of the mistakes that my students had made. And then some lessons that they learned from this practice was they learned to practice how to interview before, right? They learned to come prepared, and they learned to also brush up on their skills. And we're going to talk about the skills in a little bit. Now, when I sit back and I assess my clients who've conducted interviews over the years, and I go all the way back to um, my clients from even the late 90s, and I just really resonate on some of the things I remember. Some of the things they didn't know were some of the HR laws, which I felt that if you're going to be the one interviewing, you need to know what laws that your company have to abide by and what you're not allowed to say in an interview, so on and so forth. They didn't tell the truth sometimes about the job and the company, right? They hyped it up too much of that dating profile, trying to make it seem like, you Mac Daddy licious, and they weren't really honest about what the job would entail, about the culture of the company, if it was very competitive, if it was a quick to hire, quick to fire, if it was, you know, required you to put in 80 hours a week. Like, they really weren't that honest about the job. And so what happens is that you're selling this image that's not truly the image of the company. Some other mistakes that they have made was they didn't actually review the resume before the interview, and they didn't build their questions off of that person's resume. So we're going to talk about some of these things because these are some of the things that are on a endless list of pet peeves of interviewees. And the lessons they learned, the takeaway that my clients learn, what they learn from it is that they really do need help in this area. And it's interesting because most business owners, especially if you're a micro enterprise, you've got just a couple of employees or whatever, you will think that you know it all because it's your company. But that does not mean that you actually know how to conduct an interview the right way, what to do, how to be able to zoom in and to find the best candidate, the best quality candidate. I remember having a client who hired a person, and I mentioned this to you guys in a previous episode, hired a person to be their office manager or front desk receptionist. I forgot what her official title was. I think it was office manager, and never even paid close enough attention to her resume to see that the college, the university that she had put on her resume didn't even exist. He was caught up in the aesthetics, right? He was caught up in her looks, but he was not paying attention that her resume, it just stood off the page, and he also never verified her references. So you need help sometimes in that area. So let's go ahead, and I want to be able to share with you guys some different statistics and share with you the pet peeves that a lot of people have, including myself. Let's first talk about, of course, a lot of people don't realize that there's money that you invest in this recruiting process. And it can cost your business a lot of money, especially if you keep having high turnover. So the average cost per hire is roughly $3,000 or less per person. Around 31% of organizations spend upward of that. 5% report that they spend more than $6,000 per opening, and 17% they don't know or don't track their cost to hire data. So because they don't track it, they don't know how much money they're spending, which means they don't know how much money they're wasting. They just don't even track it. So if you're one of these individuals, hopefully this will inspire you to track your money so that you know how much is going out that's not being recouped, right? There's no return on that investment. How we go about calculating recruitment cost is we add our internal and external cost of hire, and you divide that sum by the number of hires within a certain time frame. So it can be the month, the quarter, however you want to do that. And that's how you can come up with so you can see how much recruitment costs. And I think I'll do like another episode in the near future where I can break down some of those calculations more to really help guide you in that. Now, there is something that's really interesting that I will repeat again later, but 33% of employers are taking more time to hire despite there being a deeper talent pool. And I found this information on Robert Half's website. They did a survey, and we're going to talk more about some of the other details of their survey that was just quite interesting. But let's go ahead and let's talk about some of the pet peeves that so many people have. And we'll start off with the interviewer. So if you're the interviewer, here's some of the pet peeves that you most likely have with interviewees, people that are coming in to interview for a position. Let's see. One of the things that people have issues with is when the interviewee leaves their cell phone on. They bring something to drink to the interview, like their coffee or whatever. You're looking at them like, you don't have the job. Like, what are you doing? They're late for the interview. Like, that just says you don't want the job. You don't value the person who's interviewing you. You don't value the company that you say that you want to come work for, right? Or they're super early for the interview. Now, here's the thing. You can be super early for the interview, but keep your rear end outside of the building, like preferably in your car. Don't sit in the lobby of their office waiting for an interview 30 minutes to an hour before the interview. No. Sit out in the car, be in the lobby 10 minutes before the interview. 15 is you can do. Beyond that, you set off some alarms, because the front desk receptionist is responsible for manning that space. So they're going to always let whoever's interviewing you know that, yes, your 2:00 appointment's here, even though it's 1:30. So now your interviewer is feeling some type of, a type of flustered anxiety or whatever the case may be, because they're thinking, now I have to rush. And, it's just this mixed energy that comes through. Something else that interviewers have issues with is that when you arrive to a job interview and you're not properly dressed. Now, you don't have to come up in a 3-piece suit or come up, with this full-on regalia of stuff, but you do need to be properly dressed for the job. And let me be clear. Just because you're going to work at a company that's fast food does not mean that you need to come in dressed super casual. That's still not being properly dressed. You can come in business casual, and that aligns with. Does that make sense? So making sure you're properly dressed. Something else is people that come in and they have too much cologne or perfume on. Like, even if this was a date, you're already like striking out. It's not enticing at all. So tone down your fragrance. People that come in chewing gum, or they have like a really big like piece of mint in their mouth, or peppermint, and you're just, no. Now, something that's is applicable for some jobs and not others is a multi-page resume. Now, I will pause this to say that there are some positions, especially executive level positions, that they're expecting to see that you've got some weight behind you. There are some academic positions that they need to see that you're bringing some weight with you. So you may have a 2-page plus resume, if it's relevant, right? Other positions that aren't expecting to see an extensive, comprehensive background, they are expecting you to be able to get it all on one page. There's reasons for that, and I'm going to just be honest with you. One of the main reasons is because your recruiter is oftentimes they haven't looked at your resume. Number 2, they don't want to have to track multiple pages. I mean, heaven forbid they have to staple a second page, but they don't want to. So what happens is that it ends up being a pet peeve for them. So just be mindful of that. The other things that come are, and I'm just going to kind of go through these really quick without explaining a lot of them. You didn't research the company profile, so you really don't know much about the company. You don't converse enough, so you're just kind of sitting there like a bump on the log. You don't ask questions about the company or the role. You're just sitting there listening like this is a class. You bring someone with you. I've seen it. I've heard about it. It doesn't make any sense. That person can stay outside the building, period, in the car, whatever. Excessive talking. So you can't talk too much in an interview. If you start feeling like, you're doing reading a treatise, or you're doing some kind of speech or whatever, you're talking too much. Lack of concentration, when you can't stay focused on the interview, on the questions that are being asked of you, if you've lost your train of thought and what you're supposed to be saying, that is a pet peeve. Avoiding eye contact, where you just don't make eye contact, or it's very little. It can be unsettling for some people. It's as though some people interpret that to mean that you're disconnected or disassociated from them, and that you're not confident. Let's see. Avoiding eye contact, I said. Poor communication and use of slang. I've had to definitely correct some of my students in their writing, but also in their oral presentations, of using phrases and words that you can use what you use at home, but in the workplace, in a professional environment, certain phrases and words just no. So that's why practicing is really important, so you can kind of weed out those things in advance. Another pet peeve is dishonesty, when you lie on your resume, because they have ways of filtering it out and figuring out whether or not you know Python, or whether or not you're a graphic designer, or whether or not you actually raised $500,000 for this charity. They can figure it out if they take the time. Now, I'm not saying that all companies do, because I've had plenty of experience with companies that barely even touch the surface of checking on anything that was on a person's resume. It just looked good, so they went with it. But that's not always the case, especially when the job requires a level of sensitivity, and they're going to definitely check more on that. Bulk applying to all possible vacancies. You see that the company's hiring like in 5 and 6 different areas, and you have an interest, or you're like, oh, I can do that, or oh, I'd like to do that, and you just decide to apply to all the positions. Flag. It shows absolute desperation. It doesn't show, and although it may come off to you as though it's showing I'm capable in all these areas, it's one thing to apply for 2 positions, but when you apply for 4 or 5 positions, it's a flag. Speaking critically of your former boss or organization. I don't know how many times I have to stress this to people. If you have nothing nice to say about your former boss, your former company that you work for, just shut up. Don't say anything. Just don't. Because what you're conveying to the interviewer is that you do the same thing to them on your way out. Another pet peeve is egotism and overconfidence. You're just too cocky for your own good. Surface level questions that can be easily researched and found on the internet, those are flags. Not doing follow-up after the interview. So if you didn't spend the time to write a thank you note, and not one that looked like it was just a cookie cutter copy and paste, but you didn't spend the time to write a follow-up, that can be a pet peeve and definitely a red flag. If you are during your interview, if you leave your headset or your Bluetooth on, like in the interview, so it's like in your ear or hanging around your neck, it's a distraction, and it's definitely not, of course, deemed as professional. So making sure you remove that. And if you notice, some of these things are pet peeves that interviewers have about the interviewee, but some of these are some of the same pet peeves that interviewees have about interviewers. So be mindful of that as well. Let's see, repetitive negotiation, where you're just like this endless kind of thing that you're going to just keep trying to whittle it down. A phone video interview with background noise, that's always an annoyance. If you can't get somewhere quiet, you better go in your closet, you better go sit in the car, something. But we don't need to hear, the cartoons, or, your boo thing, in the background singing, or, cooking in the kitchen, or anything else. Giving up on a job offer after accepting it. Once again, remember, I just talked about the recruiting costs. That's now a greater associated cost for them, because now they have to start back and cast that net again to try to get another applicant in, or go back to someone they had already declined and now say, hey, we got the position. It's still time that's associated, which means there's money associated with that. Misbehaving with the receptionist, assistant, or other workers of the company. You just, I don't know, maybe you think that you're in and you just get so comfortable that you just go ahead and do something that you know is like a no-no, but you do it anyway. So it could be inappropriate talk. It could just be, you're just not thinking that all eyes are on me and I could possibly lose this opportunity because I am too lax, too casual with this experience. I mean, take it like it's a first date. you know, let's see. Pointing out faults in your prospective employer's organization. It may seem so smart of you to point out all the different flaws and things that you have noticed about the company and the ways that they can improve, but actually it is an insult to them. That's no different than if all of a sudden they point out your flaws and tell you how they can fix you or how they can recommend you to someone, to help you with your whatever inadequacy that you have. Don't do that. The feeble handshake. Please don't give people weak handshakes. That little fingertip barely there. We like firm handshakes in the United States now. It's a given, and I mean you don't have to break anyone's fingers or anything, but be confident in your handshake. Not following instructions on a test. If you can't follow the instructions on the test, that means you probably won't follow the instructions given to you by your manager or coworkers. Impassive and you lack vitality. Yeah. If you're coming with little to no energy, you don't seem to be able to put your foot forward without some level of motivation, that's going to be a red flag for them. Not remembering the job that you applied for. I've seen that where people are like, okay, what job is this? Now, I've gone to an interview and I was confused because I didn't realize that the location was hosting basically multiple job positions for different companies. I didn't realize they had an office suite with other companies. So I came in and I'm seeing the name of one and now I'm confused. And I'm like, but that is totally different than not knowing what job I'm applying for. I knew what job, but I'm like, what company is this? Let's see. And I've also been called for an interview for a position I never applied for. It happened to be that, and that's, as a matter of fact, that was that position. The other company had seen my resume from the pool of the, where I had, and they then reached out to me. So I was really confused. But I knew what I applied for. I just didn't know how in the world this particular company got a hold of my resume. Another pet peeve is giving cookie cutter recycled answers to the interview questions. It's just a waste of time. Like, come on now. This is the best that you can give is something that we've heard 101 times before. Something that a lot of people don't realize, here's one, is that you send your resume as a .doc, right, instead of a PDF. PDFs, what a lot of people don't realize is that it helps keep everything well formatted and aligned so that no matter what device is opened up on, it is viewable, while a .doc can reconfigure itself and be so, just a mess. And I have experienced that where someone has sent me, a document. And I'm like, what in the world is this? So understand that could definitely be a pet peeve. Resume typos. Folks, if you can't see the typo, if Grammarly didn't pick it up, spell check didn't pick it up, have some other human eyes on that resume to double check. Not prepared with concrete examples of your professional and social success. So you have to know it. You got to walk the walk, and you have to be able to clearly articulate what you've done and why you think that you would be a valuable asset to that company. I mentioned the multi-page resume, but here's something that, and I'm gonna respond on both sides of this. The full life application, where you fill out the application there, and it is a comprehensive every job you've had since high school. Now, I will say that if the job says list all of your employment for the last 10 years, then you're about to get a long list of jobs for a lot of people, right? That may be a case where someone has had within 10 years, maybe they've had 5 jobs, or maybe they've had 7 jobs, maybe they've had 8 jobs. So if you only are concerned about the last 3 years, then that's what you should have on your application. Or it should say the last 10 years, the jobs that are relevant to this position that you're applying for. So they want you to curate your application for the specific role. I will say that I need interviewers, I need companies to make sure that your application also is reflective of that's what you're expecting. Because if you say list your because what people have learned is that the gaps in their job experience is a flag for an interviewer. Well, I'm only listing the relevant positions. So what I always tell people is if you see an application and it's not clearly explained that way, you need to write on the application that these are the jobs that are relevant to this role, so that interviewer understands what is being recorded. Something else is giving one-word answers to questions. I mean, that should be a given. Please elaborate, please. Being cliche, saying something like, I'm a people person. Oh my goodness, just, like we used to say in the 80s, gag me with a spoon. So now let's flip the script. Let's talk about the pet peeves that interviewees have. You have come to an interview and you're about to be interviewed by, this person, and they say, tell me about yourself. Oh gosh, you're like, really? You're coming with this one. This is the same old. You couldn't come up with something else. So this can be something that kind of irks because it makes you wonder, do you really want to know about myself? And what is it that you really want to know? We know it's an icebreaker, but come on. Is that what you say on the first date? Tell me about yourself. Work with something better. Something else is that if you roll out a laundry list of questions, but it's not a organic conversational type of interview, that's a turnoff. Instead of listing these, rambling out these questions, give some context as to why you're asking something. So if a position requires collaboration, say that, and then ask the candidate to share their experience working across teams. Does that make sense? That's what you're trying to get at. So instead of having all these back-to-back questions, just put some thought into it, put your heart into it, some care into it, which will also save you time by giving that context. Curate your questions better. The third thing is unclear salary or benefits, or you withhold information about that. It's a time waster. Like, share the information or connect the person with HR so they can get the information, whatever the case. But you should really have that information in advance. Period. And I will say this to people that are being interviewed. Ask before the interview about the salary and benefits, or discuss with HR somehow. Say, if there's a way for you to discuss with HR, since some managers don't deal with salary discussions. I say that managers, if you are interviewing, then dang it, have the information before the interview and have it with you in the interview. All right. Number 4, having to disclose previous current salary. This one right here, oh my goodness. I tell you, I think a lot of people want to snatch every little piece of hair they have in their body off. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what a person made at their current or their last job. What you're trying to find out is your starting point or your max point. That's all you're doing. You're already negotiating but trying to act like you're not. Don't do that. So you should provide a clear, typical range. Explain that an applicant's going to fall somewhere in that range based on their experience. Interviewees, if you don't want to disclose your previous or current salary, you can politely say, I prefer not to give an exact number, but in order to leave my current position, I'm looking for X dollars in, salary. Being sure to shoot high and then negotiate your offer, right? Don't shoot low, because they will meet that number or and that number may not have even been close to what they were willing to offer. So this is how we stop with the whole, because it's interesting. Interviewers don't like to be lied to, but on the flip side, they have no problem withholding and lying in an interview themselves. So stop the nonsense. Now, another thing is not knowing what's on the applicant's resume. That right there, I don't know how many times I have visualized choking out someone who had my resume, and that resume, and because I've done corporate recruiting, I'm like, I know by the time that resume was pulled and I was called for the interview, that resume has already, how it's circulated and how long it had been with the company. By the time, did it get to the interviewer right before they walked in the door? No, they've had it. They just didn't look at it. And they didn't decide to take notes and frame their questions based off my resume. That lets me know up front, you haven't even framed your questions based off of my resume. There's nothing that's going to be extracted to be used as a question. You're now just going to give me whatever list of questions you already have. So I'm already looking at you a little crazy. So that's one. Another one is being asked about your weaknesses. I mean, come on now. Instead of saying, what are your weaknesses? Kryptonite. But no, seriously. Instead of that, say, what skills are you currently working to improve? That is better than what are your weaknesses? You're sitting back, you're going to get a whole bunch of mishmash of crap, or they're going to say something that just sounds oh so good. Instead, what skills are you currently working to improve? That right there helps someone harness so you can get some good quality information. When an interviewer doesn't specify when you should hear back, that's definitely a pet peeve. Come on, give a time frame. Don't leave a person hanging. And we're going to talk about this more in a moment, because this is a big flag for people. Not hearing back at all is the number one pet peeve of all interviewees. A rejection is better than no answer at all. And the thing is that it is so lopsided, so one-sided, that you expect so much of the candidate, but you don't feel that you need to even respond. Even with an autoresponder, it's not that difficult, especially if you're a larger company. Like, get with it. You responded when you got the application, when you got the resume. You can have an autoresponder if you don't want to have to spend the time to individually do it. You can have an autoresponder that goes out. Now, I will say that I will address why having just an autoresponder go out is not sufficient in just a moment. Let's go to the next pet peeve. Interviews that feel like cross-examinations or interrogations. There's a room full of interviewers, and you have this one person or sitting across from them, and they're just rapid fire, like asking these questions. I would tell interviewers this, to pace the flow, right? Make sure that it just flows. It needs to be more conversational, not like it's a cross-examination. So pace the flow. And then also predetermine who on the team is asking what questions and when. And that kind of helps with that. Now, another pet peeve is the same questions asked by multiple people in the same interview. Like, if I figured out that you have asked the same question that Sue just asked about 20 minutes ago, I'm looking at you and I'm looking at Sue, like, so you guys obviously didn't, chit chat before this interview to determine who was going to ask what question. Or are you trying to catch me up and see if my answer is going to now be different, right? Which we see that a lot on some of the psychological exams that they give you, prior to your interview or prior to being hired, because they want to catch you and see that you're a liar. Come on, don't insult my intelligence. So that is something that also irks people. Here's something that deals with the timing of interviews. When people have to make up these random doctor and dental appointments to attend the interviews, like, you already know that the job candidate is currently employed. You're only willing to hire them most cases because they're currently employed, which I think is also idiotic, because you don't want to hire someone who's not employed, even though, guess what? You don't have to wait for them to say, well, I can start in 2 weeks or I could start in 3 weeks because I still have obligations to my current employer. You're willing to have that relationship, but you don't want the person who's like, yeah, I'm not employed and I can start tomorrow. So you don't want that person. Makes no sense. But you then expect the person who has a job to drop everything at your whim to come interview with you. They're going to have to lie to their current employer, which means that they're going to one point lie to you maybe a couple of times once they're hired. So if they start calling out for doctor and dental appointments after they're your employee, you'll probably start thinking they're applying for other positions. Yeah, probably so, dude. So consider being flexible for the candidates, especially if you're bringing them in multiple times in a short time frame. And as I said, you already know they're currently employed. Then most likely their office or work hours are similar to that of your company. So just consider this. What are they supposed to be doing at 9 a.m. while interviewing with you? Doing their jobs at the company that is currently paying their bills. That's what that paycheck is going for. So do you want this job candidate to one day do the same thing to your company? Just think about that. I would recommend offering phone and video interviews before any in-person interviews. Be flexible with interview day and hours. I mean, if you can do an interview on a Saturday, and your office business hours are Monday to Friday, and the company where they work is Monday to Friday. If you're willing to do a Saturday, if you're willing to do, if they get I don't know. Even lunch hours are really risky because it's factoring in travel, traffic, a whole bunch of other stuff that can cause them to run late to you, run late back from you. They're going to get dinged both ways. So I really suggested the flexibility. After hours, weekend, video, phone, all of those things. Now, something else that's a pet peeve is when interviewers don't explain why they passed you over. And that's what I was talking about earlier about if you did by chance have an autoresponder, which I know they have autoresponders, where they turn around and say, oh, we thank you for your application, but you didn't meet the thing, but we'll keep your resume on file for 6 months. All right, but why didn't I meet your expectations? Why did you pass me over? Why was I not qualified? Based on what? So that's where the autoresponder falls short. Now, unless you have multiple autoresponders that are based on you didn't meet the education requirements, or you didn't have enough experience with this, or your resume was not, just be honest and have an autoresponder that says your resume wasn't sharp enough, whatever the case may be. Like, you can have multiple autoresponders that you can have scheduled, but make sure that you're letting people know why you passed them over. That way they can improve. They can get better. Another pet peeve is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That question. I see myself still working for your company and, just doing so great. I don't know. Come on, be more creative, put your heart into it. What do you really want to know? What is it that you really want to know from that question? Dig that out of yourself and ask the question that you really want to know. Because what you're trying to see is whether or not they're going to be flip-flopping. Are they going to come and hire? Are they going to stay with us? And the reality is this: if you don't average, if your company does not track the data to see how long your workforce actually stays before there's turnover, if you don't have an average of 5 to 10 years of keeping a person, then why do you care where they're going to be in 5 years if your turnover rate is about every 8 to 12 months? You know they're not going to be with you because you clearly have issues within your organization, because your turnover is showing that you average maintaining a worker for 8 to 12 months before they jump ship. So let's just be very clear on that. Now, I can understand if you have a long history of having long-term workers, the vast majority of your workers have been with you 10 plus years. I can see why you want to see if this person has the intent to stay with us at least 5 years. Or are they just coming to get as much information as they can, enough of the knowledge base, and then hop over to something else by year 2? I get that. But you can say, we strongly value having long-term relationships with our employees. On average, our workers are involved with us. We have relationships with them on average for 10 years before we help elevate them to other positions or other companies. Is this the type of environment that you would prefer to work in? Are you trying to be with us long-term? Because we like long-term commitments. We like long-term relationships. That's how you can be able to find out whether or not a person's just, planning on hopscotching. But where do you see yourself in 5 years? Some people don't know where they see themselves at the end of the year. Come on, stop it. Here's another pet peeve. Being asked questions that have nothing to do with determining how well a candidate is for a job, or if their personality fits the corporate culture. Like, you're just pulling out some random questions because you just want to just feel so new wave. Like, stop blowing smoke up everyone's tail. Just get with the program. Find out whether or not that person fits mentally, psychologically, personality-wise, ethics. Can they do the job? Can they do it right? Can they be tenacious? Like, find out about, that's what you want to find out about. All that other nonsense, it's just poo-poo. Next one, extremely long interviews with no breaks. Now, I'm going to say this. If this is a multi-hour interview, please provide breaks. And, maybe, hey, dig in the piggy bank and stretch out a little bit and give some snacks. Can they have some kind of snacks? Some snacks, some refreshments? Is it possible? Here's a big one. Sexist and or racist questions and assumptions. Oh my goodness. Some of you people, I just know it's based on the fact that you have no clue about the EEO and other employment laws that you just keep violating every time you open up that trap door that you call a mouth. You are violating people's rights to privacy and much more by some of the questions and the statements that you make during an interview. And that's why some of you end up in lawsuits, because you just are too smart for your dumb self. So if you don't have a filter, you don't need to be the person doing the interview. That's all I'm saying. The questions and assumptions that you make that are sexually and racially based are grounds for a nice little lawsuit. Here's another one, some more. Why you're leaving your current job. Well, I'm not leaving because I get paid great, have amazing benefits. I love the people. The work arrangements are awesome. I mean, there's no place better that I'd rather be. So obviously I'm leaving because it's not the ideal, or maybe there's work hours, or reframe that. What are you really trying to find out? What are it's like asking, so why did your last relationship end? You're trying to find out who's to blame. Are you crazy, or are they crazy? And if they're crazy, why'd you stay so long? Like, it's that kind of thing. Just come on. Another one is list examples of your failures. And that's just really, um, you need to clarify that you're interested in learned lessons. You want to know what they learned from failures. Providing you a list of the types of ways in which they failed, now you have to go on an exploration. Like, no. From your failures throughout your life, what lessons have you learned? What are some of the examples that first come to your mind? The last time you failed at doing something, what did you learn from that failure? Because if what I'm trying to find out is how well you come back, you snap back from failure, how well you get yourself back up, how well you can apply what you learned running ahead, not quivering in the corner. That's what you want to know. You're trying to find out about their tenacity, their grit. That's what you need to be able to express. Stop with all the extra convolution that you're doing. Like, it's just ridiculous. Oh my goodness. Here's another pet peeve: the new video pre-screen interviews. Some of you guys are just, I get it. You're trying to bring in the technology, but, you're kind of dropping the ball with that one. Just do better. Interruptions. When you interrupt the person who's being interviewed, whether that is because your phone, someone comes in the room, or you're like, oh, I forgot. Oh, hold on 1 second. And you leave out, you mess up the whole harmony and flow. It also says that you really don't care about the person that's being interviewed. You just don't. They're just not important to you. Which is the same in reverse, right? What we talked about, the person having the headsets is the same. And that's a red flag too. Like, we don't want to see your headsets. When a person has to come in to interview at your company and on a Friday, and that's your casual Friday day, look, you either need to match the level of, meaning you can't come in dressed casual. You throw off the whole element, the whole flow, because you're dressed all casual and the candidate's suited and booted. So there's two options. Either A, you tell the candidate, because you're coming in on casual Friday, you can come wearing something like this, or you say come business casual, and then you come as well dressed business casual. But you can't come in there with your t-shirt and your jeans on, interviewing them, and they've got on, the blazer with the shirt and the no. Once again, that's also conveying that, it's this relationship thing, right? It's a date. What are you saying about this date? So get it together, give them options, or you come matched how you would on a non-casual Friday. Reading off interview questions. No one wants to sit across from you while you're going down a list. It's just like watching paint dry. Stop. Another one is eating while interviewing. If you didn't eat before the interview, you gotta have to wait till after, just like me. Don't be rude. Lengthy interview. Now, this only time this does not apply is if we're having a lunch interview. If we are both eating during the interview, that's the only time that works. Other than that, nope. Lengthy interview process. So it's like multiple calls, multiple in-person interviews. There's different people interviewing the candidate, different times, same people. It's like this. Can this be condensed? And if not, then you have to give some clear expectations of how many rounds of interviews, the dates or time frame of the rounds, so that candidates can work this into their current job schedule. Remember, because you only want to hire people that are currently employed. So they have to work that around their current job schedule so they don't get fired trying to interview with you just for you not to hire them. And then they struggle getting hired elsewhere because recruiters shy away from the unemployed. You see that cycle? Yeah, that cycle. Another pet peeve is starting an interview late. Once again, we're both trying to date each other. If you're going to show up late, that means that you're not interested in dating me. So what does that say about you? And that may let me know about the culture and the environment of that in place of employment. So I may want to steer clear of that. If you're distracted and not making eye contact, the same pet peeve that you have about people you're interviewing are the same pet peeves that they have about you. Here's a question: what makes you unique? You know, the first thing that comes to my mind is my fingerprints. So, like, once again, what's the context? Where are you aiming? What do you really want to know? Like, you want to know what special sauce are they going to bring to the organization? What's going to make you guys want to salivate and keep them forever and ever? Like, is that what you want to know? Like, give the context. Having to work for free as a test. I have seen this. It's the most disgusting practice. Don't do that. Pay the people. Pay the people. Like, don't. Especially if you're taking this labor and it's benefiting you. Don't do that. That's beyond tacky. Another one is when the first question that comes out of your mouth as the interviewer is, why are you a good fit? All right, let me go ahead and break this down. The candidate doesn't know why they're a good fit because you haven't shared anything yet about the company and your website only says so much. So how are they supposed to know if they're a good fit? This is a date. You're supposed to be sharing in this date. I'm supposed to see if whether or not I'm liking what I'm hearing and I think that I've got something that's going to make you want to come back for more. But the very first date, we go and we meet at a coffee shop. The first thing that comes out of your mind, out of your mouth, should not be to me looking in my eyes, why do you think that you're a good fit? Why do you think I should date you? Fool, please. Really? So no, don't ask that question. Don't. No, not especially not in the beginning. You can ask it later on. After you have been able to pour into them and you've been able to see, they've been able to share with you, they've done their own research. But like I said, your company website only has so much. Your blog only has so much. Like, period. So it is the requirement of you as the interviewer to be able to entice, to seduce, however you want to look at it, to fill in the gaps of what your corporate branding has not been able to do. And then at that point, the candidate can say how they're a good fit. But in the very beginning, don't do that. Don't. That is your own sense of arrogance and overconfidence that you think that you're just all that. No, boo, you're not. So that's why you are hiring for the position. Now, breadcrumbing. Here we go. Now, remember earlier I talked about how some of these employers are filling themselves, y'all. They're filling themselves, and they're being slower to actually make some decisions on hiring folks. They're just kind of stringing candidates along. So here's a survey that Robert Half they did November 2020, and it concluded January 25th of 2021. And they said that 19% of applicants lose interest after 1 week of not hearing back from the job that they applied for. 43% lose interest after 2 weeks, 15% after 3 weeks. So when an applicant feels like they've been breadcrumbed, right? They've been strung along. They're not hearing nothing. It's like, hello, 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 hello. 49% of those applicants eventually ghost the employer. They just say, put up the deuces and just say, forget them. 41% decide to go and blacklist the company. 27% vent on social media. 26% post negative comments on review sites. Yeah, folks. So you can breadcrumb all you want. You can string people along. Now we have social media and technology and all the different ways in which we can turn around and put you on blast. It's a relationship. It's a date. It's literally, you went on a date and all of a sudden I didn't hear from you anymore. Like, what? What's going on? Don't do that. Don't. So let's really look at some stuff about the job interview process. I will say this, that before ending an interview, let the candidate ask questions. Let them know the next steps in the process. End on a formal but sincere note. right? You don't have to have a stick up your tail, but at the same time, be very sincere. It's about the heart. These are all about relationships, right? And then after the interview, just like we're telling interviewees to follow up with, an email, a letter, card, or whatever, where, there has to be some type of follow up. But immediately after the interview, as the interviewer, sit down. Don't get distracted by anything else. Sit down, quickly summarize your impressions about that candidate, about the interview. And it could be separate notes, it could be on the back of the resume, however you want to do it. It helps you later to make those final choices. What you don't want to do is say, oh gosh, which candidate, who is this again? And it can't just be the guy who wore the blue suit with the polka dots, because what about him stood out or didn't? Why would you select him? So make sure you do that. Now let's just talk about the process that some of you may experience, haven't. Some of you may roll out in your own company, but let's just kind of go through some of the basics. First is, of course, the resume screening. And some of these you're doing through, because you've paid to go through some of these job sites. Other ways you're using your own company website, but you're going through an extensive process of screening to find out which resumes match closely to the job that you have described. Now, I will say that a weakness of a lot of companies is you guys have some really poo-poo job postings and descriptions. Some of you really need to do major overhauls on the posting, major overhauls on the description. Like, I feel like some of you are copying and pasting from other company sites. And I've seen some. I have my HR students do that for one of their activities. They have to search online and find, job posts and descriptions, and then I have them analyze them. Because some of you guys are just being lazy with your job descriptions and job postings. It's like when the person gets in the job, they're like, what am I doing? Because it doesn't seem anything like what the job description. And see, and I'm one of those people. I start looking like, oh, the job said I'm supposed to be doing this, but I'm not doing none of that. Yeah, that also lets me know that you haven't done a job audit, and the job that what I'm doing doesn't look anything like the job description is because there hasn't been an audit to see that there were some changes made and nothing was then streamlined into an updated job description. So red flag. So you go through the resume screening, and then there's usually a phone interview, right? Oftentimes there's a phone interview. I will say this to the interviewer and the interviewee, both of you should ask questions that can help you prepare for if there's a video interview or an in-person interview that's coming next, right? Making sure that you know that you're about to have this phone interview. What are some of the questions that can help tee up that next interview? Where you can now be even sharper and aligned. After the phone interview, you usually have your first interview that could be video or in person. Sometimes before a second interview, there's sometimes an examination that's about 1 to 2 hours long. That's to test your skills, and it could take place during the first or second interview, or it could be scheduled on a separate day. I'm saying this to the interviewee. If you know there's going to be a skills test for a job you're applying for, you better be prepared beforehand. Don't list technical skills you don't have. So if your resume says you have experience as a content writer, understand that you may take a content writing assessment. If you said that you have experience with the MS Office applications, you better understand you may be tested on them. So come with it. If you say you have experience coding, depending on what languages that you actually wrote on that resume, if you said that you have experience with Python or Ruby or C or Java or PHP or JavaScript or Go or whatever, don't be surprised if they test you on it. Don't look stupid if they test you on it and then you're like looking at a screen and you don't know what to do. You might as well just excuse yourself from the test and just call it a day and just withdraw your application. So if you said on your resume that you have presenting experience and a job requires you to do, presentations, you may have to create a slide deck or use theirs to present for 5 to 10 minutes. Be ready for it. Like, you should immediately, upon applying, saying, I need to make sure that I'm covering all my bases, because I'm not sure at what point in this interview process that they're going to test me on what I've put on this resume. So after the exam, we usually have the second, third, fourth interview, depending on the complexity of the job, the expectations, and how many people that they feel need to speak to you before they make a decision. And then you usually have your final interview with the hiring manager, whoever that may be. Then they do a background check. I, of course, have issues with, I am really okay with you checking to make sure that, I'm not some serial killer. That is, yes. I will say I do have a pet peeve with the whole credit check, because the credit check is you telling me that my credit determines my character. And if you have a low credit score, this says X, Y, Z about you. What's so funny is that we can look at all of the corporate scandals in modern times, and I can guarantee you that all of those executives, they had high credit scores. What did that say about their character? Yeah. So miss me on that is just a way to discriminate and to filter so that you can turn around and narrow down your pool. Just stop. I'm just saying, like, it's just ignorant to me. Now, I will say that if the position is about you helping people, like if you're coming in to be a financial advisor, I'm kind of looking at you like, well, why is your credit score, crappy? How are you going to help someone else with theirs? I get it. But other than something like that, where you're having influence on people based on that, because you're using your being able to speak from your own experience, it's your own credibility that is being rallied out there. Other than that, it really shouldn't matter. And then of course we have the job offer. Now here's where a lot of applicants mess up, because they don't negotiate on some points, such as salary. If the salary was first presented on a scale and not on a flat rate, you can still see if there's room to negotiate, right, on that. But even if it was a flat rate, you could still see if you can negotiate, if you can wiggle out an extra couple of grand or whatever. Don't go stuck on stupid, because they may just go ahead and rescind their offer. But there is some wiggle room. Now, I want to also share some questions to consider asking the interviewer. Here are some questions. How long have you been with the company, and what motivates you to stay? Because I want to see, what do you like about it? Why are you here? Are you just a sucker? Or is the company as good as you say it is? Something else would be, how would my performance be measured? If they can't articulate that, that's a red flag. Another question is, how often is my performance reviewed? If they only say annually, I'm telling you now, it's a red flag. If they're not reviewing your performance monthly, quarterly, you got some issues there. Because I want you to understand something about this relationship, is that unless you're going to force that upon your manager to do that one-on-one with you, if that is not a standard in their organization, it's not a system, process, function that they have embedded, what that means is that the work that you did in January, you're going to now be rated on in December, let's say. So the whole year has passed by and you didn't even know what the heck you did or didn't do. And now in December, you're being held accountable for what you did earlier in the year. That's hogwash. So that is always a flag for me. And I would always question, why is that? Why is it only once a year? Do I have the right to ask my manager, to engage my manager to review me more frequently? Because I want to know that I'm coming with my A game. I don't want to assume I am and then find out that I didn't meet somebody's standards. So that's something that's always important. Another question is, what types of career opportunities may open up later that a person in this position could pursue, assuming they perform well? That is articulating your interest to stay with the company, to make your way, laterally or upward in the company. You're trying to have a long-term relationship with them. And that is clearly what comes across. If they tell you this is kind of like, this is it, this is the ceiling, because you're coming in at this level, then if that's not what you choose to do, then it gives you a way to say, I don't know about that. Another question is, how would you describe the work environment and corporate culture? This is letting you be able to look inside, because what they put on their website is not always what's really going on. So if they can't describe it and they can't clearly articulate it, just kind of note that's something that may be a red flag. Can you describe a typical day in this type of role? Can they really describe what you should expect? And can you, as the interviewee, discern when they're rolling out some poo-poo and trying to say it's, chocolate chip fudge, right? So you have to be able to discern that to see whether or not they're coming with the truth. Another question is, what are some of the company initiatives regarding learning and development? This question is you're trying to ascertain whether or not they're going to invest in you for you to grow, for you to be able to learn more, for you to be able to grow within the company, but also grow to a point where they know that the time comes for you to go elsewhere and they congratulate and support you on your way out. So you need to be able to see what they support in those ways. Another question is, what are some of the short-term and long-term goals the company has? It may be on their company website, but most likely it's not. And you want to know, where's their focus, short-term and long-term? And by that, I can then see in the ways in which I can, work towards and really focus on those goals myself. That may really inspire and encourage me. Another question is, have you had opportunities to learn from the CEO or other senior leaders? And what are some of the takeaways or lessons learned? If they haven't had any type of connection, rapport with any of the senior leaders of the company, that lets you know there's a disconnect in the company, which means that if this person that you're speaking to is above your level, you most likely will not have any type of connection yourself with a senior member. That means you most likely will be strapped down to either frontline or mid-level. So that is also going to let you know about the relationships within the organization. If there has never been an opportunity from them to learn something directly or indirectly from the senior leaders, who are the ones that are directing where that ship sails. Another question, and let me be clear, you don't have to ask all these questions in an interview. I'm just saying that throughout some of your multiple interviews, these are some of the questions that you could extract from. Another question you could ask is, does the company create coaching and mentoring opportunities to help guide and support workers? See what you're trying to find out? You're trying to find out, am I about to come in and just be thrown into this sink or swim scenario? Or is someone going to be able to help take me under their wing to help me throughout this relationship that I'm going to be having with you? Because and that's where you're really going to be able to ascertain. Something else is, what are the expectations or policy about work hours? So if I'm working from home, what's the policy about work hours? Because what you can find out is that your hours could be 9 to 5, but they feel like, well, you're working from home, so that means they can call you as early or as late as they want, or they can expect you to do some work because where else would you be? The question could be framed around, if you have a company phone, will I be expected to take calls or respond to emails after hours or on holidays? Because there are some employers who feel like you should be on call. When they call, you're supposed to answer. One call, that's all. Like, it's like, really? So with that, you need to clarify that at some point so that you know going in how needy they are or will be, okay? Another question that you could ask is there a managerial-led or team-oriented work environment? Which environment is this? Is the manager basically calling shots and we just kind of like follow through? Or is it a case where the manager involves the entire team and the team is also part of the planning and rollout? Let's see. Question is, can you describe the rewards and discipline structure of the company? I need to know how I'm going to be rewarded for doing well and how I'm going to be punished for when I don't do well. Can they describe it? I need to know. What is this relationship going to be like? Let's see. How does the company view failing and mistakes? Now, if they had asked you the question earlier in your interview about, give examples of, the lessons you learned from failing, that lets you know that they are very conscientious of failing, and then most likely they have a positive spin to it. But you need to hear it from their mouth. How does the company view failing and mistakes? If they're a company that does not shake off mistakes and failing, then your mindset is that those are both learning experiences, and unless the mistake is intentional, then it shouldn't be punished. If that's your mindset, but their mindset is that it's all grounds for punishment, that's just a relationship you don't need to go into. You're about to get beat down. Don't enter it. Something else is, how does the company view risk-taking? There are some environments, especially a lot of our traditional work environments, that they do not value risk-taking at all. In most team-oriented environments, they do embrace and encourage measured, calculated risk-taking, right? And they'll put some parameters on it. But, that's how you'll find out what type of environment. So I wanted to be able to share that. Of course, I'll do some other episodes where we can go into some other the little nitty-gritty elements of that. But I hope that what I've shared today has been beneficial to those of you that are interviewing for positions and those of you that will be interviewing people for positions. So, that sound. It's time to wrap things up. Go our separate ways until next time. If you have any questions and suggestions about the show, please email them to us at don'tcallitsmallbiz@gmail.com. I want to share something with you. There's a quote from Alan Fox, and he says that in a job interview, you may be up against 9 competitors. Be ready to state your focus more clearly than your 9 rivals. Know your focus or get beaten by the competition who knows theirs. And I just want to share one last thing with you guys. It just made me giggle, so I have to share it. All right, so this interviewer said, I can ask you 10 easy questions or 1 tough one. Think before you decide. The candidate said, I'll take the difficult one. And the interviewer said, okay, you made your choice. Good luck to you. Here's your question. What comes first, day or night? The candidate said after a while, day comes first. The interviewer then asked, how? And the candidate said, sorry, sir, you promised me that there was only one question. Oh my goodness. The takeaway from that is sometimes you have to think out of the box. I mean, heck, reimagine it. So with that, be sure to check us out on Facebook at Foreman and Associates, and on Instagram and Twitter at Foreman LLC. Our podcast Twitter handle is It Ain't Small. Be sure to also follow us and share us with your friends, colleagues, and family. And you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Natasha L. Foreman. Yes. Make sure that you guys reach out to me and say hello. Share your story. I look forward to meeting you. I want to make sure that I give proper credit for our show theme song. You hear it? Boom and boom, boom, boom. Yeah. That's Higher Up. It's by Shane Ivers. And I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the Don't Call It Small Business podcast, for sharing these episodes with others, and for your continued support. I truly appreciate this. I mean, it's amazing that we started this podcast in 2019 and here we are in 2021. It's been an absolute blessing. So make sure that you guys share these episodes with others. Don't forget what I tell you on each and every episode. Don't call what you're planning, thinking, dreaming, or doing little or small. Go big, go bold, or go nowhere. I'll see you guys soon. Have an awesome day and week.